when a wildfire happens, there are mainly 3 departments that are involved.
Alô, Ape. Huh. What? Guys, stop! The water's contaminated! No! No! Hello? What? Wait, hold on. There's been a fire? Where? All of it? Guys, are you being serious right now? Are you being serious? Oh my god, I can't do this anymore. Are you kidding?
So obviously, no one expects this sort of situations to happen. Well, except the firefighters, because they're fighters and they're fire. They're fire! So anyway, I heard that people were given very strict instructions on how to use water. Apparently the EPA was distributing some bottled water to the people who were living there. Were there people actually living there after the fire? Was the EPA actually giving them bottled water? And how do you actually take a shower with bottled water? Huh? I mean, that could get a little funny, don't you think? The whole situation was not funny, but the showering part maybe a little bit. So what happens if this is the case? Is the water contaminated? Can you drink that water? But after some time, they said that it all went back to normal. But what is normal? Is it normal? Can you go back to normal? Why are we on this planet? Anyway, diverting from the main topic. What happened to the water? Was the water contaminated? So we all know that fire has no mercy. It literally takes away everything that it can find and it melts it down. But what about water? Does water melt? No, obviously not. Water gets contaminated. What do I mean by that? Let's take a step back. So how it works is that water comes from a certain source. From that water goes to a certain facility. It gets water cleaned and everything. And then through the pipes, it makes its way back to your house. So simple, right? No. 2 problems with that. 1, the pipes are also melting. 2, the the firefighters, they're putting these kind of foamy things to put down the fire, but that is very, very toxic. It includes, I don't remember the words. It's polypropylene. You could PFAS in short. I have another video that I'll link above. You could watch it. It's very, very dangerous and it's called a forever chemical for a reason. So all of this melting causes more melting, and then from that melting causes a lot more melting that contaminates the water, and it results in things like arsenic or microplastics, benzene, or really not pleasant stuff that's in the water. And that's why people couldn't shower, drink, or cook with it. And the case was no different for LA. I have a very special guest that I interviewed, and this company has done thousands of tests across America and more, specifically even in West LA, to find out what were the results of the tap water after this wildfire. Let's hear from the CEO himself.
Hi, my name is John Pujol. I'm a CEO of a company called Simple Lab, and we do a lot of residential water testing in and around Los Angeles with a brand called TapScore.
All right, lovely. I've heard about you guys. I've seen you guys everywhere, so thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the interview. But what I do want to talk about today is this crazy loud noise that we've been hearing about the wildfires in LA. Is it as bad as I heard?
You know, it's a mixture of water utilities in Los Angeles are extremely proactive. Responsiveness was pretty good.
How quick is quick?
I mean, everyone wants it to be instant, but these water utilities are not built for like when there's a huge fire. The fire hydrants, the water utilities themselves, the reservoirs, the plumbing, like none of this stuff is able to withstand a wildfire, right? Like that's just not expected either. You can't build every utility across the country to that kind of specification. The city did a reasonable job. I'd say in the very first couple hours and days of the fire, it was a bit chaotic. Which makes total sense.
Total sense.
It is going to be
chaotic.
Chaos. It is a chaos.
Something happened. Definitely
There's
something
allowed to be
happened.
chaos. Yeah. And in the subsequent days and weeks, you saw a lot of people get very nervous, not just about the water quality, but about the air quality.
Of course.
Because these fires have all sorts of issues. It's not just drinking water. In fact, drinking water is kind of not the highest issue. The air quality is terrible. You're like breathing in soot and all sorts of contaminants, and you can taste and smell that, you know, no matter where you are in the city. Drinking water response came, I think, over the next couple of weeks. You saw more and more communication from the utilities and from the public officials about where the do not drink notices would apply. Water utility systems are super complex. So the piping underground is extremely complex. Everyone's getting different water supplies, and different parts of the city water supply were damaged.
And they don't know which one to shut off, which one to treat, which one to kind of like...
Exactly, and they're moving really quickly to fix these things, and so they don't want to necessarily communicate too much information too quickly and people don't understand it. It's a really complicated thing to communicate in multiple languages to millions of people, something that you yourself don't fully, know what the answer is yet. Now, lots of people we're immediately worried about VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and semi-volatile organic compounds, SVOCs, in the drinking water.
I think this is an aftermath of the fire, right? This is one of the biggest issues that could happen.
So when the fire fires, it melts things, right? When it melts things, where do those melted things go? They go into the soil, they go into the ground, they go into the air. A lot of that melted leachate will go into the water system itself, and that's when you'll start getting these funky, plasticky, chemically smells and tastes in the drinking water.
So is that because the pipes itself were damaged?
Yeah, when the pipes are damaged, like not only, in other words, like not only does like the material from the pipe, plastic pipes and metal pipes, they both get burned in a wildfire like this. Not only does the material from the pipe go into the water supply and cause issues with water quality, but when you disrupt these pipe networks, and you break the suction, you break the pressure in these pipes, you actually start sucking things in to the water, right? So contaminants that are in the soil can now enter the pipes and the plumbing systems. So there's kind of two main mechanisms that you see these wildfires really contaminate the drinking water. It's one through the burning of the tanks and the pipes in the homes, but it's also through the negative pressure or suction that's created when these pipes are split open by the fire and they start sucking in all sorts of soil and contamination that's in the soil. I know that the city does end up providing a lot of bottled water, and there's probably like pickup points where you can get bottled water. And so I think that I did not hear a lot of issues. I mean, I think there were individuals who had particular issues with this in certain communities that struggled to get bottled water. If you're living in a particular building, an apartment building or a home, you essentially are drinking the water that passes through that building's plumbing, and that plumbing doesn't belong to the water utility. So there can be many issues, especially after a fire, that contaminate and impact at the home level that the utility is not necessarily responsible for. So you see big spikes in residential water testing after wildfires because people are trying to get to the bottom of the problem themselves. The utility's got their own job to do, and people at home might want to go an extra layer, to solve the problems themselves. And when we do that kind of testing for people at home, we see a lot of benzene and styrene and toluene and VOCs, typically related to like burning plastic or oils or gasoline. That's what these VOCs are called. Fortunately, the concentrations were generally pretty modest, the ones that we saw. There's a couple of very high detections, but they did linger on for several weeks later. We were still seeing these BTEX compounds, they're sometimes called benzene, toluene, styrene. We were seeing these compounds appear in the samples even several weeks later. And there were also kind of increases in semi-volatile organic compounds. These are compounds like PFAS, per and polyfluoronated compounds.
Wow, you actually could say that word?
Yes, they can.
You know how many times I've tried to say to pronounce that
it's
word?
A lot of practice.
Yeah.
It's easier to just say PFAS. And then
just say PFAS.
Per and polyfluoroalkylated compounds.
So whatever we see right now, you're saying that the pipes are being damaged, and the damages is causing some of the things that are around the pipes to get sucked into the water.
Bingo.
And then that has lots of things in it, including bacteria. And in order to clean that bacteria, we need chlorine or any sort of disinfectant to clear that bacteria out.
Unless we just swap out the pipes too. They can do that as well. You can just dig up the pipes and just say, hey, we're going to replace these pipes altogether.
Okay. And does it take like a one-time flush of chlorine, or it has to be ongoing?
It'll be continuous. And there's a lot of complicated science I don't understand about how you disinfect large distribution systems. Like I don't know how that works, but I do know that chlorine kills based on what's called contact time. So if you have a very infected system, if there is a lot of coliform bacteria found in a particular segment of pipe, they're going to either need to really jack up the chlorine concentration, or they're going to need to run it for a long period of time.
So either you get very chlorinated water, or you get low chlorination for a long period of time.
Yeah. Generally the trade-off.
Okay, so moving on from chlorine, if it's not chlorine that you haven't seen a spike, is there something else that really caught your eye?
The biggest spike was certainly in the VOCs.
VOCs.
We typically do not see benzene and toluene and styrene in
That's crazy.
City water.
Yeah.
It's pretty unusual. This was a dramatic increase in all of those compounds for the period of the post-wildfire. Now, I haven't looked at the data for the last couple of weeks, but in the 30 to 40 days after the wildfire, we were seeing, I'd say, about 1 in 3, 1 in 4 samples with relatively high levels of those VOCs. It is expected that those should go down. If not, the easiest thing for someone at home to do is to install a carbon filter. Carbon filters are really reliable ways to remove VOCs. They're one of the most common consumer-friendly products on the market for home water filtration.
Correct.
Carbon filters, and in particular activated carbon filtration, is just specifically very good at removing these kind of VOCs. The more you have, like more breakages you have, I'm actually not sure I'm correct about this, so, but like my intuition would be like the more breakages you have around a system, the more you're going to suck in. So if it's a much wider spread fire with a lot more distribution lines and systems getting compromised, each one of those is an opportunity for the pressure to kind of suck back in whatever was at that location. But it's very complicated and unpredictable, and there isn't a lot of research on it. There are a couple of scientists in the United States who focus on this. There's a gentleman at Purdue whose work is specifically dedicated to wildfires and water quality. Most of what you'll see after a water quality contamination issue in a wildfire falls into the category of like an acute issue or a chronic issue. So if it's an acute issue, that means it's going to make you sick now. If it's chronic, well, it might not go away. It might be so acute that you die, in theory, right? I mean, like, acute just means that, like, hey, the concentrations are so high and so bad that you're going to get sick now. Chronic means long-term exposure to like a small amount of a concentration can eventually make you sick. And after these wildfires, the biggest fear is always the acute stuff. That's why they send out those letters and they say like, hey, do not drink.
Yeah, but is that the right way to go? I mean, even if it's chronic, you have to warn the people. People need to know what's in their water. And the solution is not always to go to bottled water. It's also to trust filters to see if they can install a filter right at their homes. Why do they have to every time go buy plastic bottles, bring that home? It's such a hassle going back and forth, spending all that money on bottled water instead where you can have a beautifully installed filter right at the tip of your hand.
I think you can do all these things. I think the reason the city and the government tend to go towards bottled water is it's easier for them to manage. When you put these filters and systems in people's homes, it's difficult to maintain them. It's difficult to know if they're being used right. It's difficult to know if they're working. At least with
difficult.
I think it is for a central organization to like give 100,000 homes these filters. And if you've installed them before, they can be complicated. You have to know, like, hey, what to plug them into, how to connect them, do I put them in the kitchen sink, what do I need? What if I need it for the whole house, like these VOCs? Government will struggle to give you a whole home filtration solution.
Yeah, for sure. No, I was mentioning only for the drinking part.
But for bottled water, drinking, it's not perfect. You're so right. It's like a very clunky and it feels very archaic, but it works as well as anything else.
I mean, it's just a short-term solution to me. It doesn't seem like a long-term solution. So if the problem was more of a chronic thing, then the filter would solve it now and down the line.
Bingo.
But then if it's like acute, you solved it now. Okay, no bottles, nobody died at the moment. But what about 1 year from today? See, this is something that people are not very aware of. Like, people need to understand that water doesn't mean it's good if you're drinking it now and you're not dying from it. You're not going to immediately have an effect on your body, but eventually it accumulates. It just has like that effect down the line.
There are programs in California and in many other states where utilities that are struggling to comply with a certain regulation, let's say for arsenic, if the utility has high arsenic levels in water and they cannot afford to treat it at the central utility, there are programs for up to 3 years where they can distribute point-of-use systems, so filters to homes, and comply for up to 3 years with these point-of-view systems in the home, doing the treatment, doing the filtration in the home. And so such a system, such an architecture exists for this, but it is not used widely. And it is usually used in cases where a utility either, one, is dealing with lead issues, and with the current lead and copper rule revisions, we've seen a lot of utilities turn to pitcher filters to control lead risk at the tap. And it also happens in very small water utilities across the country where you have the water utility is so small they might not be able to afford centralized treatment and filtration, but they can afford to give every one of the 50 homes an arsenic removal system or something like that. But it's still a very unusual way of complying with the regulation.
Unusual, but I think sustainable. It's something that is more.
I think you're going to see more and more of it.
Yeah, we're going to see more and more of that.
Especially because two things are happening simultaneously right now. Water supplies are changing much more than ever before. not just because of wildfires, but because of climate change. We were talking about sea level rise
to.
earlier.
You have to, yeah.
Water supplies are changing quickly. Water utilities can't necessarily always meet those changes themselves, especially not the small ones. Remember, small water utilities are going to have a much bigger challenge doing what like Miami can do, or Los Angeles can do, or New York City can do, right? Like those big utilities there, they have money, they've got resources, they've got teams, they can solve problems quickly. Small water utilities with like 500 or 1,000 people, they can't move so quickly. Easier way to solve their problems is oftentimes distributing point of use and point of entry systems to the people in town, and at least keeping them safe, you know, in that way.
Yeah, so basically it depends on where you are and who's the utility who's taking care of your water at the moment. And then from that you'll understand if you're getting a POU or...
Yeah. Again, this is still very rare. But when it is, I think it's going to happen more and more.
I mean, it makes sense because as time goes by, we're finding out new things that are coming into the water, just like we had PFAS. We had no idea what PFAS was years ago, and now that we understand what it is and what it can do to the body, now people are starting to be more aware of this, but water treatment plants are still not able to treat that, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So it's what we know and what we don't know. So kind of having a filter would be, would ensure you from the things that you know that it's in the water, clear that out, and also what is coming up next.
I think people are in general going to buy more water filters because it is a safety measure you can take. They're not that expensive. You get used to having one. It's a layer of safety that you can control yourself. You still want your utility to produce great quality water.
Of course.
But there's a couple things utility can't always do. And one of them is they can't control your plumbing and your issues on site. Another is they sometimes can't deal with a particularly weird contaminant that isn't regulated yet. That was one of the big fears with PFAS. People thought like, oh, there's PFAS in my water and my utility isn't like treating it yet. Well, large utilities again were very fast to either take contaminated wells offline or to install treatment. But in the smaller utilities, when they didn't have that luxury, it was smart as a consumer to get a reverse osmosis system or a carbon filtration system and just say, you know what, I don't know if there's PFAS in my water or not. I'm going to buy a filtration or treatment system and protect myself.
Peace of mind. It was just for peace of mind.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Earlier you mentioned arsenic in the water. So would you say that would be the main issue in tap water in LA? Now I know that areas are different. Each area would have their own set of contaminants, but what would be top 3 things that we should be worried about the tap water in LA?
I think the chlorine disinfection byproducts, heavy metals, so like lead and plumbing related metals, those are always a concern, especially in older parts of the city. And then arsenic and uranium are both really common issues in a lot of California, not just Los Angeles, but in the Central Valley, because a lot of our groundwater has this naturally occurring arsenic in it. And it has no taste, it has no color, it has no smell. You can't tell if it's in there. Only thing you can do is test to see if you have arsenic in your water. And it is a very dangerous carcinogen. Like arsenic is quite lethal, even at fairly small doses. So yeah, I would stick with those 3 as the most important. The disinfection byproducts from chlorine, lead and heavy metals 2, and then arsenic is number 3. That being said, everyone has a totally different scenario. And especially if you're a private well owner, like the concerns can be completely random and arbitrary. We see people with Chrome 6, and there's people with major iron issues. Like iron isn't
Iron is an issue here?
It's not
low concentrations.
It's not as common an issue in Los Angeles, especially if you're not in city water. But if you have a plumbing issue that causes the iron, or if you have a well that has high iron, it can be a real pain in the butt. And even though it's not like a major health concern, like when it stains everything and the water tastes bad, that causes all sorts of other issues in the home. Like for example, I had a well growing up and we had not high iron levels. But I had a couple of friends who would come over and they would get like sick because of our water, because the well water had relatively high iron. I didn't notice it.
Oh yeah, you got used to it. You were immune to it.
I was immune to it. I didn't notice it. But I think this is the kind of way in which most water issues manifest. It's like a combination of like, what are the issues and like how sensitive are the people drinking that water? And when you move, you feel like most sensitive, I think.
Okay, so now that you know all these things about water, I mean, you know exactly what's in the water. I mean, I'm sure you've tested your own water. What's the water that you're drinking?
I actually drink my tap water. I live in Berkeley, California, and in Berkeley we have water from a utility called EBMUD, East Bay Municipal Utility District. EBMUD water is great. They test it. It's great source water. I've tested it. I don't have lead pipes. I've tested that. We don't have PFAS issues. I've tested that. Not every part of the country is going to be the same.
Yeah.
You know, it's very common for the utility to tell the community that their drinking water is great.
Yeah.
It's not always equally true.
So obviously, I'm not a doctor. I do not know exact health effect that each of these contaminants might have on your body. But I do know, and I'm very sure, that I don't want to be drinking any melted plastic, oil, or gasoline that might be found in my water. If you like it, just give it a thumbs up, subscribe to that button. Subscribe to that button. And I did this. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to that button. You know what to do. Peace out.